The gamble. No analyst saw coming. It began with a whisper of an idea, so quiet, so unpolished, that even the team behind it hesitated to take it seriously. It didn't come from a strategic roadmap or a competitive analysis. It emerged from a late-night conversation, a problem mentioned almost in passing, a possibility that felt too small to matter. But small ideas have a way of slipping past the filters that kill bigger ones. Every industry has moments analysts claim they predicted, patterns they insist were obvious in hindsight. But this story didn't fit any forecast. It didn't match the models, the metrics, or the assumptions that guided the experts. It was the kind of gamble no one could quantify, and for that reason, no one believed in it. To understand how this overlooked idea gained momentum, we must go back to a time when the company behind it was desperate for direction. Their growth had plateaued. Their competitors were louder, faster, more confident. Investors wanted sharper vision. Customers wanted better answers. And the team felt trapped inside the echo of their own expectations. Then someone asked a simple question, one that cut through the noise like a spark in the dark. What if we tried something different? No one expected that question to matter. Not the team member who asked it, not the leader who nodded politely, not the analysts who would later pretend they saw it coming. It was just a suggestion, light, almost throwaway. But buried inside that question was a challenge. To step away from the logic that had guided them for years and to consider a path the industry had overlooked entirely. They began exploring the idea quietly, without pressure. A few mock-ups, a few tests, a few conversations with users who reacted with unexpected enthusiasm. The team noticed something subtle. This idea, small as it was, addressed a frustration customers rarely articulated but felt constantly. And in that gap, a new possibility took shape. This is where the reveal begins. Because while analysts were busy predicting the next big trend, the real transformation was forming in silence. Inside a gamble too unconventional for spreadsheets, too unpredictable for models, and too human for traditional forecasts. And soon, that tiny question would grow into a movement powerful enough to rewrite the company's future. As the team dug deeper into the quiet idea, the reveal sharpened. What started as an afterthought began generating reactions they had never seen before. Early testers leaned in. Conversations lasted longer. Feedback arrived not in vague suggestions, but in specific, eager requests. The idea wasn't just interesting, it was resonating. Still, the team approached it with caution. They had chased promising concepts before, only to watch them collapse under scrutiny. But this one behaved differently. Each iteration solved a real frustration. Each prototype revealed new angles the industry had overlooked. And with every small improvement, the team uncovered a truth hiding in plain sight. Customers had been waiting for something like this, even if they couldn't articulate it. The reveal deepened when the data arrived. Patterns formed across user interviews, usage tests, and support logs. People weren't just curious, they were relieved. The idea addressed a friction so common that most users had accepted it as unavoidable. Analysts had ignored this space because it didn't fit any of their neat categories. Competitors overlooked it because it didn't align with their grand strategies. But customers felt it every single day. And inside that overlooked frustration lived an enormous opportunity. Yet momentum brought tension. As excitement grew, concerns bubbled up. Some leaders argued the idea was too unconventional, too far from the company's core identity. Others worried it might distract from the major features investors expected. Engineers were split. Some loved the fresh challenge, while others feared the technical cost of pursuing something so different from the existing roadmap. The conflict intensified when early tests revealed a serious constraint. The idea relied on capabilities the company had never built before, pushing their infrastructure into unfamiliar territory. They hit walls, performance bottlenecks, design complexities, practical limitations that complicated even the simplest interactions. The team realized the gamble was far more demanding than they thought. Still, they kept pushing. They built ugly prototypes that barely worked. They debated workflows until late at night. They stripped the idea down to its most essential form, then rebuilt it stronger. And with each cycle, the concept gained sharper definition. Users loved the direction. The market, unknowingly, was shifting toward the exact behavior this idea supported. And even skeptical voices began to recognize its potential. But the deeper they went, the more the gamble threatened to collide with a structural flaw buried inside their foundations, one that had sat quietly for years, invisible until now. If not addressed, it would turn the entire experiment into a dead end. And fixing it would require a level of risk the company wasn't sure it was ready to take. The conflict waiting ahead was no longer a question of possibility. It was a question of courage, whether they were willing to challenge their own limits to bring an unexpected vision to life. The flaw emerged at the exact moment the gamble seemed ready to accelerate. Buried deep in the system's architecture, it operated like a hidden trap, silent, invisible, but powerful enough to sabotage every version of the idea the team produced. At first, it appeared as a slight delay in testing, then as inconsistent behavior. And finally, during a full-scale simulation, the entire prototype buckled under conditions far lighter than real-world usage. The conflict erupted instantly. Engineers gathered in emergency sessions, tracing logs that looked more like riddles than clues. Designers watched their carefully crafted flows collapse into errors they couldn't explain. Product leaders paced hallways, balancing rising excitement with rising panic. The gamble that had sparked hope was now revealing a threat far bigger than anyone anticipated. The system itself wasn't prepared for the future they were trying to build. Inside the war room, tension cracked through every conversation. Some argued for abandoning the idea before it consumed more time. Others insisted the flaw could be patched with enough creativity and pressure. But with each test, the same truth resurfaced. The core infrastructure, years old, untouched, taken for granted, wasn't capable of supporting the new direction. And that reality pressed against the team like a weight. Rewriting this part of the system wouldn't be simple. It would force them into fragile territory, dismantling components that powered critical features. It could introduce instability across the entire product. And with competitors gaining ground and investors watching closely, the timing couldn't have been worse. Yet the gamble demanded it. The emotional peak rose as the team confronted the real choice: continue building on a foundation that would eventually collapse, or rebuild the foundation itself at the risk of everything they had left. Arguments intensified. Careers felt suddenly tied to decisions no one controlled. The idea that once felt liberating now pressed relentlessly against their limitations. The tension wasn't just technical, it was psychological. Because deep down, everyone understood that this was the moment where companies either evolve or fade. Then, in the middle of a late-night debugging session, one engineer uncovered something extraordinary. A pattern hidden within the flaw that didn't just reveal the problem, it pointed to a solution. A subtle inefficiency, a timing misalignment, a structural oversight from years earlier, now magnified by the demands of the new idea. It wasn't an easy fix, but it was fixable. The discovery struck like a surge of electricity through the room. Exhaustion gave way to clarity. Fear transformed into focus. For the first time since the flaw appeared, the team saw a path forward. Not safe, not simple, but real. The gamble no analyst had predicted was no longer just an experiment. It had become a turning point, forcing the company to confront its greatest vulnerability and its greatest opportunity at the same time. And the next step, rebuilding the core under pressure, would define whether this quiet idea became their breakthrough or their breaking point. They began the reconstruction with a determination sharpened by every failure, every late-night debate, every moment the idea almost collapsed under the weight of its own potential. The flaw was no longer a threat. It was a blueprint revealing exactly where the old system had reached its limits and where the new one needed to rise. Engineers tore into the outdated core with surgical precision. Years of shortcuts unraveled. Assumptions once treated as permanent dissolved under scrutiny. The deeper they dug, the more they realized how much of the company's future had been constrained by invisible barriers built in its earliest days. And as each layer came apart, space opened for something far more powerful to take its place. The rebuild was relentless. Processes were redesigned from the ground up. New architectures replaced brittle logic. What had once seemed impossible now took shape through a combination of focus, exhaustion, and newfound clarity. Each test ran smoother. Each iteration moved faster. And the gamble, once fragile, began to feel inevitable. Then came the launch. They introduced the rebuilt system alongside the idea that had sparked everything. Not with fireworks or sweeping promises, but with quiet confidence. Users arrived curious. They stayed impressed. What once lagged now responded instantly. Workflows that had always felt heavy suddenly felt weightless. The product didn't just work. It elevated the entire experience in a way no analyst's model had ever predicted. This was the climax. The moment the gamble transformed from a whisper into a force. Adoption surged far beyond expectations. Communities shared their excitement. Reviewers praised the innovation. Competitors scrambled to understand how such a leap had happened under their radar. And inside the company, a recognition settled in. The gamble had not been lucky. It had been necessary. The resolution carried a deeper truth. The idea succeeded not because it fit established predictions, but because it challenged them. It thrived because it emerged from curiosity, not caution. It rose because the team had the courage to rebuild the parts of their foundation they were most afraid to touch. And in the end, the gamble no analyst saw coming became the breakthrough that redefined the company's future. Not because it was perfect, but because it forced them to evolve when evolution mattered most. Sometimes the smallest shift in perspective becomes the beginning of a new future.